So I hope you enjoyed today's show. What we are going to do, of course, is every now and again do some extra episodes. Now, we were going to put this as the main episode, however, we kind of rambled on a little bit. So what we're going to do, an extra Watchalong episode, the first ever Raw, the 11th of January, 1993. It's not quite as old as me, but it's older than our producer, Zoe Styles. So, grab your network. Go on, grab your network. Go to Raw. Now, the new layout's not very handy. It's not as easy to find stuff as it used to be, but go to the network. 11th of January, 1993. Get Raw ready. Now, if you need to, you can pause me now. And then now that you've pressed play, I'm going to give you a 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to go into the video. It's not your 3, 2, 1 to start Raw, though, because we're going to do that in the video. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go. So we were going to do the Raw watch along at the end of the episode, however, the episode did overrun slightly. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to make this into a bonus episode that will also go up at roughly the same time as the original. So if you don't want to have the seriousness of the first episode, because the way that ended was a bit extreme, and certainly
I think that's putting it lightly, really. I mean, after seeing what's went on, I don't know whether I want to retract us broadcasting it.
It's a bit late now. You already let me approve it.
I know. I think that while I want to be able to help these guys out and to figure out what's going on, because at the end of the day, JJ is our friend.
Yeah.
And whilst I don't know Murphy all that well, I still feel as though he should still have his side of things as well. You know,
Yeah, he's certainly going to have plenty to say after he sees what happened in the last one. But let's get a bit lighthearted. Let's do a watch along for Raw. Now, hopefully,
I'm actually really excited about this because I've got the blurb in front of me, and I can see Vince McMahon, Randy Savage. Not to love about that.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the 3, 2, 1 play, right? Are you ready? So,
yes.
3, 2, 1, play. Of course, live at the Manhattan Center, one of the greatest venues in the 90s. The first face we see, of course, is Sean Mooney. One of the things I really love about the initial run of Raw was the fact that Bobby Heenan wasn't allowed to be on the show. I was a huge fan of that storyline, and how he eventually got kicked out by Gorilla Monsoon was just so beautiful to see. It was one of those moments where you wanted Bobby Heenan to get kicked out, but then when you get older, you're like, no, don't go. We're going to be left with Rob Bartlett as a commentator on Raw. He's horrible.
I love Heenan's aggression, just his kind of in-your-face attitude.
This intro, not one of the greatest Monday Night Raw entrances, but it is one of those that they were able to actually replicate it on the Super Nintendo in short form, but you did get a version of this on the Super Nintendo, so I was a huge fan at the time.
I actually quite like it. I think that it captures the age, but then you've also got it's less in your face than more modern ones.
If you were watching that, if you are watching the first episode as you watch this, you can see that the person doing the rallying of the crowd there as well. Rob Bartlett on the right, possibly the worst commentator in the history of wrestling. Honestly, so bad. Koko Beware versus Yokozuna. I don't like Koko Beware's chances, to be fair. In 1990,
I love Yokozuna. I think that he's very, very talented. The fact that he could do so much with the size that he was.
And you hear how much food he would eat. It was incredible. But
have you seen the colors on Savage? Like, he's so bright. It's like a peacock.
This is the point where I think he was a bit pissed because he wanted to be a wrestler. He wanted to be on the show. And they did have him
Of
wrestle
course.
10 and stuff. But Vince wanted to go with the younger generation. And I think one of the things that's quite interesting is Savage went on to have a brilliant run in WCW, showing he was still very capable. So the Coco Beware, the gear that he's wearing here, as well as being very 90s, is also the same gear that Owen Hart was wearing at the same time, and their tag team High Energy, which I believe may have been broken up by this point. Of course, Yokozuna, not actually Japanese, he's from Hawaii.
I do love that Usos Hall of Fame story. That this guy's not Japanese, this man called Rod.
Yokozuna, allegedly, if he liked you, he'd wash his ring gear. If he didn't like you, he'd just try and kill you. So, yeah,
And too, right? If you're going to be that size, then why not?
It's one of those, if Yoko didn't want to do something, I'm quite sure it'd be difficult to make him do it. But you see what he did for some talents, and you can see the influence he had later down the line, because at roughly this time you also had, Fatu, which is Rikishi, was in the company, and Samu, and at various other points, Barbarian came into that team as well.
I like the smaller arena.
Yeah, well,
I think that if I got a ticket for that show, I could sit in the stands, not pay front row prices, and still feel as though I was part of it and like raring to go.
Well, this is the venue where they did Raw 25. So
yeah, but Raw 25 was awful.
Yeah, I mean the fans there apparently felt really, really badly done by.
And you're right. I mean, it was kind of like a forgotten little sister.
This is where Yoko was wearing his red and white tights. Now, he also wore red and black. I was a fan of the red and white because it matched the Japanese flag. So
yeah.
I think it worked. Now, one of the things that's quite interesting, this would be considered dead TV right now. This is the stuff that happens when you're away an advert on Raw today. So getting to see what's happening here, it's almost like you're seeing behind the scenes. And this was weekly television. And we're talking about today being reality television, and you said on this week's episode, everything's a bit too streamlined, a bit too smooth. And with WWE here, you're getting to see his ass, which is...
I know, that's literally what I was just about to comment on. I mean, I don't like turnbuckle cams because it just it doesn't show you anything.
Yeah.
Unless somebody's going headfirst into one, what's the point?
Well, see, I was a big...
But then at the same time, it's not fine.
I liked when WCW had the guy standing on the apron, so you actually get the in the
ring.
There
we go. That's exactly what you expect from Yoko, and that's the kind of thing I expect from Braun Strowman. The fact that you do have that, lock up, and then he's just a mile away.
Coco doing his best as a Memphis wrestler. He understands how to get the crowds in. He's a guy who would have worked his ass off in Memphis and would have had to get these fans on side because you're in those venues every week. I'm a big fan of Coco Beware. Somebody who a lot of people questioned him going into the Hall of Fame, but for me, I think Coco was very deserving. He was a guy who wrestled in quite a lot of companies. I thought he was somebody who would have been snapped up by WCW just to be in and around the scene at the time. But it's a shame that he was too small to be massively over, but he was also, when you look at him now compared to some guys, I think him and Apollo Crews, if you were looking for multi-generational tag teams, Coco Beware from 92 and Apollo Crews would be a huge tag team. I think perhaps you could even stick him with Ricochet, and that would be a huge... I know that seems like I'm going down the color route, but it's not about that. It's about talents that I think actually are similar in the fact that Coco Beware was a high flyer. Coco Beware could do those high flyer moves. You see the drop kicks on Yokozuna. He's able to get up, drop kick him, and turn and land.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Vince McMahon on commentary. Not so much a fan of Rob Bartlett on commentary.
I think my issue with Vince McMahon was that he'd always force the story on you. While it was entertaining to hear him do the color, he would have to just hammer home those "you must know this about this story" points.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's quite interesting is that up until from '86 to '92, he played the Birdman and came down with Frankie the Parrot. But in '92, he dropped it to form a tag team with Owen Hart. And at this point, he was already appearing in other companies as well. So he wasn't a
Yeah.
full-time guy in WWF. But High Energy feuded and generally lost in feuds with the Nasty Boys, the Head Shrinkers, and Money Incorporated. But they only made one pay-per-view appearance at Survivor Series '92. So that for me is very interesting. That these are guys who fought with Nasty Boys, Head Shrinkers, and Money Incorporated. But only had one pay-per-view match. You're fighting against three top teams there, three tag team champions. A nice solid win for Yokozuna.
My battery's sitting at 14.
I'm a huge fan of watching guys like Yokozuna now, because that's how I think jobber matches should be done, as far as I'm concerned. So do you want to talk about what you see here on TV?
I like the fact that they've just cut away from the match. It's not being quite as, this is this, that is that. They literally, it was like a crossfade out into this new promo where we're seeing hype for Hitman, Luger, Razor. We know who the big guys are. Obviously, you've got the hype for the Royal Rumble January 24th. And I can tell just by watching this who my top card is and who I'm meant to be rooting for, which is fantastic. I mean, obviously, I miss the girls with the cards and stuff as well. And wow, she's really not wearing very much. I mean, I know it's a product of its time, but why on earth would you have someone that's skimpily dressed? Anyway, now we're finally hearing some McMahon on commentary. My favorite guy.
See, when you're doing a watch along and you have technical difficulties, you can still fix them. It's fine.
Of course.
When you're
I can't believe he's got pink underneath. I don't know why that makes me smile.
Because the idea is that pink's not meant to be very manly. So it's meant to make you think that Bobby Heenan's not a man. But here's a guy who goes out every week, puts himself in the line of wrestlers, puts himself in a position where he could be attacked. Now, at this point in '93, he wasn't really managing anybody. So for me, I think if they'd given Bobby a year off and let him get that neck surgery he later needed in WCW, and then Bobby Heenan was to return late '94, and Bobby Heenan was to step into the position of managing people then, building the first family, and also that's the point where you start to see Jim Cornette coming in as well. You could have had a really solid time there.
I don't know if it's just me. I'm watching this promo and the only thing I can think of is Bobby wearing a toupee. I don't. It's the way his hair is parted. It looks as though it would lift right off.
I think Bobby is one of those guys that he didn't mind showing his ass. And
yeah.
I love that about guys.
That's a fantastic flag. I would love to have that flag hanging on our wall.
I'm certain I know who owns that flag.
Everybody do.
Well, one of my acquaintances on Facebook has that flag. Now, I believe the people under this mask, let me go and find out for you who these are. Because I think
one thing about watching this is that I probably don't know half of these guys. I mean, like, you know what you had? Oh, I saw Doink! I see Doink!
So this is when Doink first started showing up, so he hasn't attacked Crush yet at this point.
That's the weird thing for this, though, is that I know the guys who are big now, but that's the funny thing about watching TV like this, is that you realize sometimes people just fade with time. And it's the problem with the modern TV at the minute as well, is if you're not on every single week for, 3 or 4 weeks, people just forget who you are. I like that Cell job. He's clearly quite a bit bigger than him, so he didn't even get up. That I like.
One of the things that I find quite funny, and you're talking about cell jobs. I'll be honest, you have no choice if you're in there with the Steiners. They will make sure you sell.
Of course. But that's exactly is that perhaps what we're missing just now, is we don't have that legacy there anymore to ensure things are done the way you would expect them to. I mean, you'd expect like Orton to do that in the ring, but he's not being paired with somebody who would need that at the moment.
Now, see, for me, one of the things that I think would be quite interesting is, so I thought I knew who were the Executioners. That's the masked guys in this match, and I did. The first one is Dwayne Gill, and the second one's Barry Hardy, who were notorious jobbers at the time. Dwayne Gill would go on to be Gilbert, if you remember Gilbert. He was.
I do recall that, yeah. I mean, I'm not a Goldberg fan, but
Gilbert was a piss take of Goldberg.
Yes, you can rip the out of me for that, not liking Goldberg.
No, it's fine. Goldberg ended the career of my favorite wrestler. So, one of the quite interesting things here is the dark match of the show was Crush beating Bam Bam Bigelow, which is quite cool.
I like the fact that although you're frozen. I like the fact that although there's a hard cam there, there's also a bit of a shake to it. So you feel as though you're following the match as opposed to just kind of having the wrestlers position themselves for you. It feels more authentic, I think the word would be.
It seems more real. That's the thing.
Yeah. Less scripted, ironically.
And that's the thing. I mean, these episodes are 1 hour long, and I think we will end up by the end of it, hopefully, figuring out whether you enjoyed it or not.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely hope so. I still like. I don't know why, but the fact that Doink's in the crowd, just at the corner of your eye, is making me giggle.
It's such a weird way to introduce a character, but it's he's there. He's mischievous. He's blowing water in people's faces and stuff.
Do you think the colours were crafted specifically for him? Because I think if he wasn't red and green, if he was blue and orange, that character wouldn't go over as well.
Well, this is a character that was built by Matt Bourne and taken to WWF because he had this idea in WCW and they didn't want to do it. He was Big Josh, who was a Hacksaw Jim Duggan ripoff. And one of the things that's quite interesting is Doink the Clown. I'm not talking about Doink the Clown that's been played on the indie scene, because Doink the Clown on the indie scene has been played by quite a lot of people. Here we have another Bobby Heenan segment with Bobby Heenan's sister or cousin or something. But it's Bobby in drag trying to get into the first show.
I love this. I genuinely like. He speaks such a pretty lady. And look, he's trying to adjust his boobs.
So apparently the Doink
Why am I surprised? Like he's taking the wig off and he's like, oh my god, it's Bobby. Is it really?
So apparently the idea for Doink the Clown was originally Hawks.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
Yeah.
So the list of people who portrayed that gimmick were Matt Osborne or Matt Bourne, Steve Cairn, who was Skinner, Steve Lombardi, who was Brooklyn Brawler.
Now, are these both representative of the time, or are they just trying to get a rise out of folk?
They're trying to be like the Godfather, like the Cuban, you talking to me, huh? Type of shtick. But yeah, the other people who played him, Ray Apollo, who was Doink for a wee while, Dusty Wolf, who did it in the NWA. You had Ace Darlin, you had Scotty Flamingo, who was actually Raven. Eugene did it for a while on SmackDown, losing to Chris Benoit. Jeff Jarrett did it to pull pranks on Dink. Men on a Mission and the Bushwhackers were 4 Doinks at the Survivor Series in '93. and Chris Jericho was doinked to ambush William Regal, which is just really cool. So Razor, that little tuft of hair. Now, obviously, I struggle to grow hair. That little tuft of hair bugged me for years because it was also on the wrestling figure.
What fascinates me about this is the fact that when you hear that Razor didn't like toothpicks,
Yeah.
and he just continued with it because that's what the character did.
Yeah. Now, Vince had not seen the film that the character was based on, so it was quite interesting to see that Vince got so behind it. I think he thought it was original until somebody had actually told him,
Mm-hmm.
which is hilarious to think. But here's a guy who bust his ass in various companies, friends with DDP and WCW and NWA, the AWA and stuff. But he copies a film character, and all of a sudden he gets over. To me, though, as a kid, I hated him. Hated him. As an adult, copied him regularly on nights out, and not just the volume that I drink. He's
You know,
cool.
that's the first time I've seen Owen Hart in anything in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
WWE don't present him all that much, but I hated him. But see his finisher, it was so devastating. That Razor's Edge, for me, was just devastating. I didn't know how anybody could kick out of it.
And yet somehow you've regularly done it to our 2-year-old.
Fair point.
It makes a tough kid though. Like that kid's fearless, and I'm willing to bet a large degree of that is the fact that we do gently wrestle with him.
Yeah. So to be clear, the Razor Ramon character was based on characters from Scarface.
Never seen Scarface.
Tony Montana, and Manny Rivera from Scarface. And he only did it as a joke during his meeting with Vince McMahon. He quoted lines from the film with a Cuban accent, gave ideas for vignettes. Now, the Razor Ramon vignettes would be copied 10 years later by Carlito. Now, after we've done this watch along, right, I will show you the Razor Ramon vignettes, and then I'll show you the Carlito vignettes. And they are literally shot for shot.
I miss Carlito. Like, seeing him in Glow was pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, Tatanka, there's one who I was a huge fan of as a kid. Back when I didn't know that you could dye your hair. So
you just thought it grew that way.
I thought it grew red.
Fair enough.
Now, this is Max Moon. So I'm watching this on a smaller second screen. Max Moon is ridiculous.
And look, cheap pyro. It's at Party Poppers.
Yeah, he shoots pyro from his arms.
That does not sound dangerous at all.
Now, Max Moon.
Well done for Gene for moving out of the way there, though.
That's Finkel.
Finkel, even. I knew who I meant.
Okay, so the character of Max Moon was actually portrayed by Paul Diamond. Paul Diamond, if you don't know who that is, was actually in Bad Company with Pat Tanaka. So he actually wore a mask and pretended to be Japanese when he was at Orient Express in WWF. Another person pretending to be Japanese. But Paul Diamond was, for me, a very good wrestler.
That felt weird for me just there, where you had Shawn clearly doing his iconic backward thing, and the guy was just stood right in front of him. And maybe that's just because I'm a modern viewer.
Yeah, because everybody's prepared for where to go. Now, one of the things...
But that said it really off for me. That felt disrespectful.
Well, one of the weird things was that Shawn would later go on to do that in the ring with, like, 8 and 9-year-old boys. I mean, that's creepy. I mean, like, knowing what we know now, Sean has never been accused of those things, but it just seems like something we wouldn't allow today, just to be careful.
Yeah.
But yeah, Paul Diamond is playing the character here. He was Max Moon, he was Kato, he was Paul Diamond, but um, in 1994 he was in WCW. They reprised their Orient Express gimmick, but because they couldn't use the name, they were called Bad Company. Great wrestler. But this gimmick was actually brought to WWF by somebody that you will know, Conan.
Okay.
It was his gimmick, and Conan actually did portray the gimmick on camera a few times, and I think they wanted him to, give more time than he wanted to WWF, because he also had jobs in Mexico that he wouldn't have wanted to give up.
It feels weird for me watching this. That little segment just there before, wow, that looked really cool. But that little segment there before that, where there wasn't actually any moves going on, like they were running ropes, they were doing stuff, but it wasn't, spot.
You can imagine if they're doing that, that would be one of the ways you could do things where you make people believe lots is happening in the match without hurting your body.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, if this was NXT, there would be a ton of like spot, and then two people would be laying on the ground, and you'd be wondering who's getting up.
And that can be exciting at times. But if every match is like that,
yeah, I quite like this slower pace. I mean, it looks almost a bit like a comedy match because Sean is selling for things you wouldn't think he would. Like when he grabbed his leg and Sean's looking at him as if, oh my god, I don't know why you grabbed my leg, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
That doesn't relate with my perception of who Sean is as a character.
But this is 93, he's still finding his feet.
He's with.
Yeah, but this is 93, he's still finding his feet. At the Royal Rumble in a couple of weeks, Brett versus Razor, Sean versus Marty Jannetty. So this is the return match from when Sean threw him through the glass.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those interesting things that Sean hasn't quite found his feet yet. But bear in mind, Sean, who hasn't quite found his feet, was the Intercontinental Champion in 1992, and he was the Intercontinental Champion against Bret Hart for the World Title at Survivor Series. So Vince saw something in him as far back as 92 as a single star. I mean, at WrestleMania 8, he faced Tito Santana. So that was a big deal to be facing a former tag champ, a former IC champ.
Yeah. He's fixing his hair, but he's in the ring.
Yeah, that's Sean, though. He's vain. He's so vain, he probably thinks your insult's about him.
Not that that's copyrighted at all, no.
No, absolutely not. See, back in these days on Raw.
See, that's what matters to me. With a match like this, where there's one pinfall, it's a 1-2, get up into something else. There's no immediate pinfall after that. That I like.
One of the things that always bugged me about Vince McMahon was he would instantly go, 1, 2, 3, we've got to win. Oh no, he kicked out. He would do that all the time. But now when you look back, I'd take Vince over Michael Cole, Tom Phillips. I think he's a good commentator. At this point, we've had the Executioners, who have been jobbers. Max Moon, somebody who's not really won matches very much, so as a jobber, but as a character that even had stickers in the sticker books.
That's the one thing that's bugged me so far about this show, is that it has just seemed like all jobber matches.
Yeah.
Then that said, we're only like 20 minutes in, if that.
Minus adverts as well, but this was live. This was a brand new concept for national television. Now, you had live TV shows, but they were Saturday, 10 o'clock in the morning, and they were usually done for, an audience of about 30 in a studio. But this
I love that the audience are quite respectful, though. Like, they're not chanting, they're not shouting, they're not, like, throwing things. They're just watching the match.
And you've no, I mean, Max Moon is somebody who, at this point, today, that's a gimmick. You know, it's a jobber and he's getting beaten 2 minutes by Braun Strowman and nobody's questioning it. Whereas in these days, there was still the belief that the characters would win. The character could get the win. And
psychology.
Yeah, it could propel them to something which they would later use with the 1, 2, 3 kid.
Even if he doesn't get the win, the fact that he can hang with Shawn and make him go all out is a sign of respect in itself for facing anybody else.
And that's something that can later be used where, okay, Max Moon didn't get the win, but do you remember 3 weeks ago when Max Moon faced Shawn Michaels? He was very close to getting a win. This week, off against Crush. Let's see how he does. And then you're like, okay, so he did lose his last match, but clearly the company think he could win, and that's important.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing there, when Max Moon tried to get out of the move, most people hold like this, so it's almost like a swinging motion. It looks a lot more impressive.
Ooh,
that one was almost like
impressive.
Balls.
The fact that he's just thrown him over the ropes there.
It's one of those things we don't get to see that quite as much today. That was impressive as well, the dive. Back in those days, people weren't doing that.
And it's safe as well. Like, you had no fear that Shawn was going to smack his head off someone or break his neck.
Yeah, I mean, Shawn just had to take a normal flat back bump, and Max Moon just had to land on his feet, essentially.
Yeah.
Shawn took a mean...
That's how you know the guys can go every single night on a loop and just... They know they're coming out the next night without popping pills.
Oh, he held that for the pin. That's a winning move a year before for anybody.
Yeah. And the fact that he got a 2 count on Shawn. I mean, those lads, again, I like the fact that Shawn isn't getting up immediately. That to me matters. He's not just immediately taking a massive bump and then went, oh, well, that was nothing. Let's move on to the next thing.
That was a sweet chin music, and it was used to stop a comeback. It wasn't used as a finisher yet. That was him going to do his suplex. That's his finisher, the suplex. He would later reverse that and do the suplex, and then when the person got up, straight into sweet chin music.
Do you think that could be a solution, though? Have the WWE creative and talent sit and play something like 2K18, 2K19, and see what it takes to build a match up and wait ages for that finisher that you're never going to get.
I mean, I have a problem with rewatching old shows like this because I always fear that I'm watching it with rose-tinted glasses. But I'm not skipping the old stuff. Perhaps that's because the shows are 45 minutes when you take the adverts out.
That's what I love about this, though, is the fact that I can't sit. 45 minutes doesn't seem that long to me, but I still feel as though I've had the same amount of entertainment as I would have got from a 2-3 hour show.
WWF Mania was a great show, so they actually did it in the studios at WWF, and it was in the room where they actually had, like all the TV monitors and stuff, and they would actually be like editing footage and stuff. It was done in that room. So
I like these graphics.
Yeah.
The ones that are proving up to tell us what's coming up. We haven't got an annoying voice in the commentary team going, oh my god, wait till you see this. It's
annoying voice by Michael Cole.
Yeah, mostly.
Now, I miss the event center. Now, this is not the event center, but it's the same idea. Because obviously Sean Mooney would do the event center. Mean Gene would do them for the pay-per-views. So when Mean Gene left, we kind of missed them. But by 95 and 96, on Mind Games pay-per-view, the VHS I bought for it, which had Mankind versus Shawn Michaels, Michael Hayes actually did an event center during that. And they actually had a purpose-built set for it at headquarters, which meant that they could film batches and batches of these and just air them when they needed.
I don't miss the blue belt.
No?
No. White or black for me.
Is that because you have the white and the black one?
Well, kind of. I mean, the white one's not mine, but, blue just looks... If it was a darker color, I could maybe get behind it. It's the fact that it's so bright. But that said, it works with his outfit.
I think the one thing that for me is strange, you've had somebody wrestling a match and then you've got somebody cutting a promo. Now, the creative side of me would be saying, you know what? Jannetty just got thrown through a glass window. They should have a camera going to Jannetty and saying, do you have any words for Sean at his house? Because they won't let him to the venue because they know he's going to attack Sean. But what that's just told me is that they were in the same venue and they were there at the same time. I mean, that's just how I look at it. You should have, I mean, today you would do something like do a sit-down interview in Jannetty's house. You know, what's going to happen at the Royal Rumble when you finally get your hands on Shawn Michaels? And then Jannetty's going to be like, listen, I know I said I could do this interview, but I don't want to talk.
I like that players like Father Boa comes over the logo. It looks as though they're like, although the technology then isn't as defined as it is now, this for me works more.
I mean, if you've ever played the game TEW, the same technology that the same techniques rather they used in TEW for the superstar pictures is all they were doing there.
I prefer this promos to having like Charlie Caruso come out with the interviews and ask who's doing what, because you can actually just listen to what's being said and understand like who it is, where it is, when it is, without her like just no disrespect. I'm happy she's got a job, but it takes away from what the point of the promo is.
Yeah.
But now these graphics have gone on too long. I know they're covering the Royal Rumble and who's going to be in, etc. But they could have broken that up a little bit more for me.
Yeah. But at the same time, WWE have got access to the USA Network, so this gets to promote quite a lot of stuff.
Why does it look as though there's a big comb in his head?
He's got the bubble effect.
Yeah.
Big fan of the Berserker. Somebody who I think Carlito's dad was in it as well for the '93 Rumble, so that's quite an interesting one. The Great Tenru.
So how far are we from Rumble at this point?
So 2 weeks. Well, yeah, 2 weeks.
Okay.
Samu and Fatu were in there. I mean, this is a point where the roster was pretty bare. Pretty bare. I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't doing 3-4 shows a night like they were with Hogan. Hacksaw Jim Duggan's kind of match. Oh! And that's not us talking about Lita in 2005. Could be, though. Could be. Tough guy. We miss Mean Gene.
Yeah. I do like that we've got his gear, though, his trading cards, his microphone. Like, that's really cool.
It's one of those weird things that I managed to get a signed microphone by Mean Gene, and I got it literally weeks before he passed away.
The weird thing about watching this is I keep thinking it's a video game. Because obviously I played the video game before I've seen this. I keep thinking Mean Gene's just commentating over the video game.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to get excited when Mean Gene's talking about wrestling. He's just one of those...
What's that blazer?
Yeah. So, I know somebody at High Spots is actually doing auctions with Magnum TA, and he's got the WCW version of that he's auctioning off.
See, for me, the kind of lag between matches has gone on a little too long now. They could have cut that halfway short, went into Heenan, and I would have still been just as entertained.
But the ratings weren't so important back then, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Uncle Morty Feldman. I'm a huge Bobby Heenan fan. I didn't appreciate him until I sat and watched a shoot interview he did with Jim Cornette. And I realized he really loved to entertain. And even if you were wishing for people to beat him up, he just loved being that guy.
But you know what I'm baffled by? Like, quite genuinely, we're probably about 40 minutes in now.
Yeah.
I honestly, I feel like we've just been watching this 15, 20 minutes.
And what's really interesting is the last match is featuring somebody who essentially 27 years later is still under contract.
Yeah.
It's amazing. They used the same venue quite a lot for Raw, the Manhattan Center. It was a great way to get the show going. They would do an hour live every week on TV.
I still think she needs more clothes. I'm by no means a feminist, but she's wearing a swimsuit. If you're going to wear something revealing, at least put some sparkly diamonds on there or something, or make it like an outfit. Don't just stick her in a swimsuit.
I mean, this segment is Kamala turning face, where he turns his back on Kimchi and Harvey Whippleman. He actually got given Slick as his manager for a while. The one who briefly managed Big Boss Man and Akeem, who was one-man gang. Akeem, the African Dream, who was a piss take of Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream.
I think I'm having to remember with this that it is the first one.
Yeah.
So it's not as if they're continuing on from last week's show. They're having to establish exactly what the stories are, who the characters are, and who you're meant to be kind of rooting for.
The USA Network did have WWF TV, but this was the first time it was put on to essentially a primetime slot on a Monday evening. This was a huge deal for WWF at the time.
Yeah, and if it's a regular thing, you're going to have to expect that there'll be story establishment there.
Yeah.
So even if we're not seeing as much wrestling as we expect, it'll be because they'll get their hands on each other next week.
And the thing is, what would happen with Raw is it started off where you still got some jobber matches, and then they realized that they could actually do Ric Flair versus Kurt Hennig in a loser leaves town match and do it on Raw. People had a reason to tune in. There's no other wrestling on that night. You know, a lot of other wrestling was done, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. So
I keep thinking that his rap was going to come down there.
They had
as he's kind of
characters like Damien Demento on, who Damien Demento probably couldn't get away with that 9 o'clock in the morning on kids' TV. He's somebody who did an interview a few years after this, basically said that he felt like he was a wasted opportunity because he was a great character who should have been massively over. Damien Demento was awful. And you'll see in this match against Undertaker, Damien Demento was not a special wrestler.
But then again, you've got similar stories with guys like, the Al Snow story, where he's given 10 minutes every single week, and then he's saying, like, why am I getting just 10 minutes? 10 minutes isn't enough, you're not using me. And then someone goes, yeah, but like every single minute costs Vince like $1 million.
Yeah.
So he's investing 10 million in you.
And
that's another one on this that I haven't seen for a while.
Yeah.
Paul Bear.
This version of Taker.
Even I love that. Even the referee is scared to hold that urn.
Yeah.
Like, that's fantastic. Okay, yeah, I see what you mean about this. This already, I'm looking at an Undertaker who raises the living dead. And I'm still freaked out by the movements of Damien Demento.
But it's more, he seems more like a comedy character. Almost like that day's Boogeyman. But not as good.
Well, that's exactly what I thought. When he moved, when the legs went, the knees, the shiftiness, I thought of Boogeyman.
Yeah. I mean,
see, that's something you don't see now either, is the bumps on the middle rope.
Yeah.
Or maybe you just don't notice them as much because they're all the same color.
I mean, Drake Maverick almost brings attention to the middle rope, but
that's why, because he's so small.
Yeah, Rey Mysterio does it as well, But yeah, I mean, back here, we've watched an hour show, and at the end of it, we're not going, okay, this is dull, we've skipped stuff. What we've actually done is we've went, you know what, this could have been shorter. Maybe this could have had, a little bit more time, whatever.
Yeah.
Overall, if you're used to, imagine we're used to the environment where we can go and sit and watch anything we want on the network, and we can watch the Attitude Era with swearing and naked girls. And at this point, you're coming from wrestling essentially being either Saturday morning television, because ratings have been dying and it's been moving to that Saturday morning television PG era, or right before it was Saturday night's main event on NBC, which was 8-9 o'clock at night, which meant that it was slightly more adult, but still stuff that you could largely show on the kids version at 9 in the morning. So Raw was an attempt to start moving towards that concept of a show that's anything can happen. That's why they want it to be live. Anything can happen. And we're a minute and 48 seconds away from the end of the show, and we have no massive run-ins. We're not telling a story massively that people have to digest. We're showing The Undertaker somebody to be scared of. And Monday nights is football night. So when the football fans are flicking through and they see wrestling, it might just grab their attention.
There. I think what stands out for me about this is the fact that, like, when I watched the first Russo Nitro, it felt like a drag. It's not that the content wasn't good. It's not that the show wasn't where it should be. It was that by the time I got to the 4th or 5th segment, I'm sat going, okay, so what now? Surely we can wrap it up at some point, and I would not feel so tired. Whereas with these short ones, this one's 45 minutes. The first Nitro was also 45 minutes.
So now you've seen, sorry to interrupt, but now you've seen the first Nitro and the first Raw. Now obviously there's 2 years and a bit between these shows. But now you're seeing Crush coming out. This is setting up the angle where Doink would obviously attack Crush.
Please tell me that his arm isn't damaged the whole time. That he's wearing this bandage and there's nothing wrong with him. That's got to be where this is going.
I forget that you're younger than me and you haven't seen these angles.
I haven't. No, there's a ton of this TV that I've never seen. And the crazy thing is, as we've had the WWE Network for $9.99 a month.
Yeah, this was never shown in the UK. We didn't have it here. It was 90.
They never pull off Doink's wig. I feel like if you're going to go attack Doink, that's the one thing you would go for.
So there's a white mask with the front open, but it's a full facial mask with the front cut out and attached.
So,
So this
you know what he reminds me of?
Who?
Mr. Tumble.
Oh, the kids.
I mean, it's potentially because we've got kids.
I mean, when you look at Matt Bourne was a man's man.
He's the only Doink for me.
Yeah, he smoked, he drank, he was just brutal. But when you see him doing stuff like that and you realise anybody can portray any character. Now, seeing as you've watched Monday Night Raw and you've watched Nitro, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you now to give me your opinion. The 2.5 years between Raw and Nitro, so obviously the wrestling business evolved. So adjusting for era, which show grabbed your attention more? Was it Nitro that was able to see what Raw did and build on it? Or was it Raw, which was taking Saturday morning's TV and trying to get it on for the American football fans on a Monday night? Which one grabbed you?
I definitely preferred Nitro. But again, it could be, as you said, because they've watched the WWE product and they've had the time to figure out how to piece things together. If anything, for me, Nitro had a little bit too much wrestling. I'm talking about the first one here, not the Russo one.
Which had
I'm talking about the one they did in the Mall of America.
Yeah.
I think there was a little too much wrestling on that one, as daft as it sounds as a wrestling fan. But I still got to the end of that, and I was very happy that I hadn't just been sat watching something.
It made
I was
you the
involved.
following week, yeah? Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
I mean, with this, it's entertaining. You've got the characters, you've got the story, which I think is more developed than what Nitro was. And had they had maybe an extra match in there, I may have gone for this one.
Okay. So perhaps the Royal Rumble segment being a little bit shorter and maybe get, at the time, somebody like Money Incorporated out there to have a tag match and get over somebody, or somebody,
Yeah.
somebody quickly.
I think if there was a match in the middle there to break that up a little bit, I still would have argued they were more heavy on the side of promo, but only because they've also got the segment with Heenan going on.
Okay, well, so just so you know, that first one did garner a lot of interest. It actually got a 2.5 rating, which is really good. On a Monday night when football's on, that's really, really good. Now, whilst I have
Well,
you,
speaking of which, just out of curiosity, if you had Rangers on versus, say, Hamilton, but then you also had, Raw on in the same time slot, what one would you opt for? Bear in mind, they're both run-of-the-mill shows. There's nothing special. It's not like an old firm or anything.
I'd probably want to watch the football live and then
Catch up with the wrestling.
VHS back in the day. VHS
Yeah.
Raw.
Do you think that's because you grew up with the fact that the VHSs were catch up essentially?
Yeah.
You'd go into work and you'd get the new VHS, or you'd go to school and you'd borrow it from your mate.
Yeah.
So you're used to seeing
what
that second hand.
So it wasn't from my friend; it was from my mum's boss at the time. That's what we used to do. So the first one got a 2.5 rating. Whilst I have you here, I'll just tell you quite interestingly. I'll double check just to make sure it was a 2.5 rating. But the first one got 2.5, and then we look at the second one; it got a 2.8, which means that they were actually building an audience. They weren't just putting on a show. The first one happened and they built to show 2. Now, we're not going to sit and watch the second one, but what I am going to do is I'm going to give you the card for the second one. And I'll tell you, I think they should have went with show 2 as their first one instead of the other way around. So they had Mr. Perfect beat Terry Taylor with the Perfect Plex. They had Marty Jannetty defeat Glenn Ruth. Glenn Ruth, do you know that name?
Not off the top of my head, though.
So Glenn Ruth is Thrasher from the Headbangers.
Oh, right, I know that, yeah.
Yeah, and then the main event was El Matador, Tito Santana versus Ric Flair, which ended in a no contest.
That I would love to see.
Yeah, you had Repo Man assault Randy Savage during the introduction. Bobby Heenan on the phone during Mr. Perfect and Terry Taylor, complaining about not being allowed into the arena, and he insults Rob Bartlett, which everybody else should as well. Ric Flair interrupted the Mr. Perfect Terry Taylor match, assaulting Mr. Perfect and threw him into the entrance steps. Mr. Perfect still picks up the win. Vince McMahon interviewed Bret Hart about his match against Razor Ramon at the Royal Rumble. We then had a Paul Bearer and Undertaker 30-second promo. Shawn Michaels is on the phone during the Marty Jannetty Glenn Ruth match. They did quite a lot of phone calls, and they continued right up to about 96. So it kind of gave the suggestion that not everybody was at every show, although usually towards 95, 96, they were pre-taping shows. So the phone calls would not be done during the match. They'd be done later on and then transposed onto the screen. The El Matador Ric Flair match ended in no contest as Mr. Perfect dragged Ric Flair out of the ring. Both Flair and Perfect brawled for a minute before security broke it up. Gene Okerlund presented the Royal Rumble report, very similar to what you watch. But what we also saw was footage from Superstars of Wrestling, which was kind of the other show to Raw, showing Doink the Clown attacking Crush with his prosthetic arm. So I think once we stop recording, I will show you that segment so you can see. And the fans' reaction was insane for what was essentially a beatdown. So that was kind of the second Raw. Which one would you prefer? Now, I want to tell you one last thing that happened. The show ended with the Repo Man stealing Rob Bartlett's car, because what's his is his and what's yours is his, because he's the repo man.
I like gimmick.
Yeah. So which show do you think was better, the first one or the second one? Based on just hearing the second one.
I think it's an unfair comparison considering there's a lot more matches on that card, and there's a lot more like talent that we would recognize now as showcase talent. Okay. For me, it's quite difficult as a modern fan knowing what Ric Flair, Lex Luger, Scott Steiner go to become. That for me can like pique my interest. Whereas at the time, if I were to watch this without knowing that kind of thing, it would be far more difficult to judge.
Okay, so whilst you can't make that comparison, what we will do is we'll fast forward to when you were 1 day old. So this was the B option for today. You were possibly going to watch either the first one or the first one that happened after you were born. The card for the one after you were born was Lex Luger defeated Austin Steele, Jeff Jarrett defeated John Paul, not the Pope. The Head Shrinkers defeated Men on a Mission. Adam Bomb defeated Tommy Angel. Doink the Clown with Dinks, who's now a babyface, defeated Joey Stallings. Shawn Michaels with Diesel defeated Tyron Knox. So by the time we get to the following year, it's following more of the traditional format of a WWF show with lots of jobber-style matches. But they did have the Head Shrinkers versus Men on a Mission on there, which is a card that a match that, if you built it to a pay-per-view, could have been on a pay-per-view for the WWE. So this is the first time they were regularly giving out pay-per-view quality matches every week. So
I don't like a lot of jobber matches on a show. I think the jobber matches are designed for a character push, for development, even in cases to get the jobber over as opposed to the person they're in with. Now, for me, with the first Nitro, we had a decent cruiser match, then we had a jobber match, then we had a main event level match.
Okay.
That format for me made quite a lot of sense because it didn't feel as though you were just kind of spoon-fed wrestling as supplementary for the fact that there was no story.
Okay, so one of the things that's quite interesting is that if we fast forward a year and I give you the card for the TV show and see what you think, okay? So
Okay.
It was actually the January 23rd, 1995 Raw. From your first birthday. Well done. You made it to a year old. It was the Manatee Civic Center, which was in Florida, and the show opened with the Smoking Guns defeating the 1-2-3 Kid and Bob Holly to win the WWF Tag Team Championships. Erwin R. Shyster defeated the jobber Buck Quartermain, and the British Bulldog defeated the Black Fan. And the matches were 15 minutes, 2 minutes, and 3 minutes. Right?
Okay.
As a show, you get a big tag team title change. So that's automatically, in those days, going to get you something. Right? Let's look at the dark matches that happened before the show went live. Okay? This is where we saw Man Mountain Rock defeat Pat Powers. Bruiser Bedlam defeated Gary Scott. Lex Luger defeated Tatanka. Diesel defeated Jeff Jarrett. The Undertaker defeated King Kong Bundy. And Bret Hart defeated Owen Hart.
And those were all dark matches.
Those were all dark matches for the people who paid to see the show, because that was still in the day where, the TV's...
that. Do you know what? See, if we were able to go to a show that we knew were going to be live, but then they put on pay-per-view quality matches just for us to see. If they were to kind of highlight that in advance, and we were to sit, 3-4 months before and go, do you know what? We're the only people that are going to see Luger versus Bret. That would make me want to go.
Do you think that's something that's detrimental, the fact that we get to see everything?
I think that giving out everything makes it feel a lot longer than it is. I'm a fan of, like, when they do the big pay-per-views, they've got the first part, and then you've got the post stuff, but they don't do enough with the post. I feel like angle-wise, you always hear these stories about how The Rock and Austin just got in the ring and started rapping with each other.
Yeah.
Or, Booker T's Spinner Rooney segments.